Welcome to another podcast from Shoulders of Giants. Thanks for joining.
Great to be here.
Today we're taking a deep dive into Seneca's essay on the shortness of life.
Ah, yes. A powerful one.
You flagged this one for us, and, well, our goal is to really unpack his core arguments. We want to get to the heart of how Seneca viewed our relationship with time.
And it feels incredibly relevant, doesn't it? Maybe even more so today.
Absolutely. So Seneca jumps right in, addressing that feeling, that common complaint.
That life's just too short. We hear it all the time. We probably feel it all the time.
Exactly. But what's so striking is how he immediately pushes back on that. He challenges it.
Right. He says, hold on, is it really too short? Or is it how we're using it?
Precisely. He argues, and this is really the core of it, that we actually have ample time if we use it wisely. It's not the lifespan itself.
It's the management, or lack thereof.
It's how we spend it. He puts it so powerfully. Something like, life is long enough, and it has been given in sufficient measure to do great things if we spend it all well. But when it is wasted in heedless luxury and spent on no good activity, then it feels short. Then we suddenly realize at the end that it passed before we even knew it was passing.
Wow. Yeah, that hits home. It immediately makes you pause and think, okay, what about my day, my week?
Definitely.
Yeah.
And he uses that great analogy comparing life to wealth.
Oh, yeah, the fortune analogy. It's brilliant.
He says, look, even a huge fortune could just vanish if you mismanage it right.
Poof. Gone.
But even a modest amount, handled carefully, can grow.
And he applies that same logic directly to time. A life well-planned, well-invested, it has more than enough space for fulfillment.
Okay, so that's the foundation. It's not about the quantity, it's the quality, the usage. Then he starts getting into the specifics, doesn't he?
Oh, yeah. He gets down to brass tacks. He starts dissecting all the ways we just squander it.
And the first big one he tackles is this illusion of busyness.
This feels so incredibly modern, it's almost uncanny. He's talking about people constantly running around, always occupied.
Looking busy, feeling busy.
Right. But achieving very little of real substance, of what truly matters to them. He paints these pictures, people consumed by politics, chasing wealth, endless social obligations.
Stuff that keeps them perpetually occupied, but maybe not fulfilled.
Exactly. And you have to ask, what's the real point of all that frantic activity?
He poses that piercing question. When do such people ever truly live for themselves?
Oof. Yeah.
It forces you to look inward, doesn't it? How much of our own activity is driven by external stuff, climbing the ladder, keeping up appearances?
Social pressures, expectations.
Rather than what we genuinely value or need. It's like living for an audience sometimes.
That's precisely Seneca's point. These individuals, he says, are often living for their clients, their bosses, their social circle.
Everyone but themselves.
Pretty much. And in doing that, they neglect their own inner life, their own development, their own needs just get completely pushed aside.
And it's not just the big career or political stuff. He also digs into the smaller, maybe more insidious ways we waste time, these wasteful habits.
Right. This part really made me examine my own day-to-day. He doesn't miss much.
What kind of things does he mention?
Well, things like excessive socializing, just being constantly on for others, or chasing fleeting pleasures, the next shiny object.
Okay.
And even getting too caught up in other people's business, meddling in their affairs.
Gossiping, maybe? Or just unproductive worrying about others?
Yeah, that sort of thing. And he makes this incredible point about how careful we are with money.
Oh, yeah, that line is sharp.
We guard our finances, right?
Yeah.
But we're so careless, so extravagant with our time. And he says time is the one thing where it's actually respectable to be greedy, to be protective.
That's such a powerful reframe. Most extravagant with the one commodity for which it's respectable to be greedy. It flips the script entirely.
It really does, because time is the ultimate non-renewable resource.
So true. Then Seneca shifts gears a bit, looking at how our mindset, our way of thinking, also robs us of the present. Specifically, procrastination and living in expectation.
This feels like another direct hit for modern life, doesn't it? Always planning for the future, the weekend, the vacation, retirement.
Always deferring happiness, deferring living to some point down the road.
Exactly. We're constantly putting things off. And Seneca quotes a poet, "Each best day of our wretched life is first to flee."
Meaning the present moment, the best moment we have, is always slipping away while we're looking ahead.
Precisely. It's an urgent call to seize the day, the now, instead of pinning all our hopes on a future that, frankly, might never arrive or might not be what we expect.
We live in rehearsal mode,
That's a great way to put it. A rehearsal for a life that never quite starts.
So to help understand this, Seneca breaks life down into three parts, right? Past, present, future.
Yes. And his analysis of how the preoccupied the person caught in that illusion of busyness interacts with each part is really insightful.
How so?
Well, he argues they essentially lose their past because they're too busy, too distracted to ever stop and reflect on it, to learn from it.
So the past just becomes gone, undigested experience.
Pretty much. Then the present, well, that's just this fleeting thing they rush through. Lost in distractions, always on to the next task.
Never truly in the moment.
Never. And the future, that's uncertain, obviously, but for them, it's this thing they're constantly chasing, pinning their hopes on, but never quite reaching in a meaningful way.
But he contrasts this with someone who lives differently, someone more philosophical.
Exactly. He suggests that those who engage in reflection, particularly through philosophy, can actually reclaim their past.
How does that work?
By taking the time to study it, to learn from the experiences of others, to draw wisdom from history and thought. For Seneca, the past isn't just dead and gone, it's a vast repository of knowledge.
So it's accessible, it's usable.
If you make time for it. Which leads him to a really crucial distinction. True leisure versus what he calls mere idle occupation.
Okay, this is important. He's not saying don't be busy, just do nothing.
Not at all. He's differentiating between genuine leisure, which for him means time dedicated to self-improvement, learning, contemplation, philosophy.
Purposeful relaxation, maybe.
Yes.
Or growth.
Yes, exactly. Versus just filling time with trivial stuff. Idle occupation.
What are some examples he gives of that?
Oh, he paints these almost comical pictures. People obsessed with their hair or their clothes, spending hours on grooming.
Okay.
Or mindlessly watching spectacles like gladiatorial games in his day, maybe binge watching something today.
Maybe.
Or indulging in overly elaborate banquets, constant partying. He argues these aren't real rest. They're just other forms of preoccupation, ways to avoid confronting ourselves.
Distractions. Sophisticated distractions, perhaps.
Right. He even makes fun of, like, academic pedantry people getting totally bogged down in obscure historical details or minute literary points that offer no real wisdom or benefit, intellectual busyness for its own sake.
So it's about the quality of our non-work time, not just having free time.
Precisely. It's about engaging meaningfully. And for Seneca, the ultimate path to that meaningful engagement, to true leisure, and therefore to a life that feels long and well-lived,
Is philosophy.
is philosophy. He sees it as the key to unlocking a richer experience of life, regardless of the actual number of years. It connects you to the wisdom of ages.
He talks about having philosophical companions.
Yeah, isn't that a great idea? By engaging with the great thinkers of the past, Plato, Aristotle, Zeno, whoever you effectively expand your own life, their wisdom becomes available to you.
They're always available, never too busy for you.
Exactly. They offer guidance, perspective, things you might not get from your contemporaries who are all caught up in the same daily grind.
That's a really compelling way to think about reading and study. So connecting with wisdom makes life longer in a qualitative sense.
That's the idea. Then he turns his gaze towards the end of life, and it gets quite sobering. He describes the regret of those preoccupied people.
The ones who are always busy but never live for themselves.
Yes. He paints this picture of them facing death filled with fear and regret.
Why fear? Not just the unknown.
He suggests their fear isn't just about dying, but about being forced to leave a life they never truly grasped, never fully lived. They look back and see waste, time squandered, opportunities missed.
Ouch. That realization must be crushing.
Absolutely. And he contrasts this sharply with the ideal figure, the Stoic sage.
How does the sage face death?
Calmly, with acceptance, because they've lived intentionally, meaningfully. They've used their time well, engaged with wisdom, lived in accordance with nature and virtue. So death isn't a terrifying interruption. It's a natural conclusion to a life well lived.
It's a powerful contrast, a real motivator to get our act together, so to speak.
Definitely. Seneca also takes aim at our relentless pursuit of external validation. Things like fame, public office, recognition.
The stuff society often tells us equals success.
Right. But he argues that chasing these things often comes at a massive cost. Our own time, our own inner peace, essentially our own lives.
He gives examples, doesn't he? Like powerful people wishing they could just have some peace.
Yeah, he shares these almost tragic little stories of emperors or generals longing for simple leisure, for escape from the burdens of their position. And he kind of mocks the absurdity of people clinging to demanding jobs, even when they're incredibly old, long past any need to work.
Why do we do that, according to him?
It seems tied to that external focus. We measure our worth by titles, by accomplishments, by what others think of us, rather than cultivating inner contentment. True fulfillment, Seneca insists, has to come from within.
Not from the approval of the crowd or the size of your office.
Exactly. And related to that, he also touches briefly on materialism, on how even pleasures can become sources of anxiety.
How so? Because we worry about losing them.
Precisely. He uses that striking image of King Xerxes looking over his massive army and weeping.
Why was he weeping?
Because he suddenly realized that in 100 years, not one of those soldiers would still be alive. It's the impermanence of it all. Seneca uses this to argue that rooting our happiness in external things, wealth, possessions, even armies, is inherently unstable. They can be lost. They will be lost.
So true joy needs a more stable foundation.
An internal one, rooted in virtue, wisdom, contentment with what you have and who you are, rather than constantly grasping for fleeting externals.
It all seems to circle back to that central theme. Mindfulness, deliberate use of time, focusing inward.
Absolutely. Seneca is basically shaking us by the shoulders, urging us to wake up, take control, resist the endless distractions and pressures, and actually cultivate an inner life through reflection and wisdom.
His insights, they're ancient, but they feel incredibly sharp, incredibly challenging for us today. He really forces you to examine your own life, your own preoccupations.
Yeah, to ask yourself, am I truly living, or am I just existing, being carried along by the current?
Swept along by busyness, by expectations, by trivialities.
Right, and his emphasis on the present moment, the value of looking back thoughtfully, and the pursuit of wisdom, it feels like a timeless roadmap, really. A guide to a more meaningful life.
However long that life might be in years.
Exactly. It's about the depth, not just the duration.
Well, we hope this deep dive into Seneca's On the Shortness of Life has given you some valuable food for thought.
Definitely worth chewing on.
What parts of Seneca's arguments really stood out to you? Did anything make you reconsider how you approach your own time?
It's a conversation starter, for sure, both with others and, perhaps more importantly, with yourself.
Absolutely. We encourage you to revisit Seneca's essay if you can, and just continue exploring these ideas. This is just the beginning. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
That's all for today's video. If you think this topic helped you or found it interesting, feel free to investigate further and read the book. Hopefully you can take something you learned and apply it to your own life. If so, share it in a comment below. Thanks everyone, and have a great week.